Did you know in United States in 1999, a new home in Suburban, Ohio came with an unfinished basement that always emitted static on radios? The family who bought the home, Paul and Sandra Whitmore and their daughter, Lily, were excited to move into what they thought was their dream house. Built on a quiet cul-de-sac in Mason, Ohio, the 3-bedroom colonial had everything they wanted: a big yard, friendly neighbors, and a sense of peace. But from the moment they first toured the house, something felt off. The real estate agent nervously joked about the basement being quirky, brushing off the odd humming sound and insisting it was just poor insulation or old wiring. Paul, a former electrical engineer, thought little of it. He believed he could fix whatever was causing it. They moved in mid-March, when Ohio's winter chill was just beginning to ease, but the basement remained cold unnaturally so. Even with heaters, it seemed to suck warmth from the air. Radios placed anywhere near the stairwell would hiss with static, and if turned to certain AM frequencies, a low rhythmic clicking could be heard. Paul set up a small workshop in the basement. That's when things started going wrong. Tools would go missing, only to be found hours later in places he'd never left them. One night, as he was repairing a broken lamp, he swore he heard the light switch flick on upstairs. But when he went to check, everyone was asleep and the switch hadn't moved. Then came the static dot at first. It was just background noise, but then it began forming patterns. Paul, curious and increasingly uneasy, began recording the sounds and comparing them to Morse code. What he found made his blood run cold. Trapped, here US, sealed. He showed the recordings to Sandra, who insisted he was just stressed. But things only escalated. Contractors brought in to finish the basement often refused to return after. One visit, one man, a veteran with years of construction experience, walked down the stairs, paused midway, and turned pale. "Something's wrong here," he said before sprinting out the door. Another passed out entirely, waking up moments later, muttering a sequence of numbers over and over. 11:22. 11:22. Sandra, skeptical by nature, began having disturbing dreams, cold, metallic corridors, screaming, voices echoing through static, and the image of a steel door sealed shut. She started sleepwalking, always ending up at the basement door. Their daughter, Lily, just 6 years old at the time, began drawing strange pictures tunnels beneath the house, faceless men with radio headsets and scribbles labeled Deep Room. She'd hum unfamiliar tunes while staring into the air vents, frightened. The Whitmores contacted a local historian and amateur radio enthusiast named Harold Brinks, who had once served in the military during the Cold War. When he visited the home, he immediately recognized the interference pattern as a signature of Cold War-era radio bursts. But he couldn't understand why they were still active or where they were coming from. Digging through city archives, Harold discovered that the neighborhood was built over the proposed site of a secret military communications bunker, part of a failed Cold War experiment in deep earth broadcasting. The facility had been designed to survive a nuclear strike, buried over 30 feet underground, with one goal: to send emergency commands to distant military assets using low-frequency coded bursts, but the project was scrapped in the early 1970s. After a mysterious containment breach, the exact location of the bunker was classified and presumed destroyed. Yet, Harold believed the Whitmore home sat directly on top of it. He convinced the family to let him bring in ground-penetrating radar equipment. The results were undeniable. Beneath the home, over 20 feet down, was a massive hollow space, rectangular, reinforced and sealed. The radar also showed metallic echoes consistent with steel-reinforced doors and internal PASSAGEWAY. Harold submitted the findings to the local authorities. The response was swift and chilling. Within 48 hours, men and unmarked vehicles arrived. They cordoned off the property under the guise of a sinkhole risk and forced the family to evacuate for 2 nights. When the Whitmores returned, they found the basement concrete freshly resealed, a new power junction installed, and all of Paul's equipment missing. No explanation was given. Worse still, the static returned. Louder, only now it wasn't just radio static, it was audible, humming through the walls at night, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lights would flicker in response to it. The basement door sometimes shook gently at 3:13 a.m. Sandra documented it. Every night, the same minute, a subtle knock from beneath Paul. Driven to obsession, began descending the basement stairs with a flashlight, trying to find any trace of a seam in the floor some way in. He uncovered one tile that sounded hollow. Wind struck, but the moment he tried to pry it up, the lights exploded above him in a shower of sparks. That night, Lily began speaking in her sleep. Not in English, but in broken Morse code. Listen, buried, not dead. The house had become a conduit. Something deep below was trying to be heard. Asterisk Paul was never the same after that night. He stopped going to work. He stopped shaving. His days were spent listening hours on end in the basement with headphones clamped to his ears, meticulously decoding static like it was a language only he could understand. Sandra pleaded with him to stop. Whatever's down there, it's not meant to be opened, she warned, but he didn't care. He'd become convinced that someone or something was trapped below, trying to send a warning or maybe a plea for help. One night, Paul showed Sandra a page of scribbled transcriptions. It was shaky, handwritten, and a manic scrawl, but legible. We were never meant to leave. They locked the hatch. We begged. The code is the key. Turn the dial. Frequency 19.3. Sandra didn't know what any of it meant, but Paul did. He dragged up a battered radio transceiver he'd bought at a flea market and tuned it to frequency 19.3. For an hour, there was silence, and then a human voice. Weak, distant, trembling. "We're still below," Sandra screamed and pulled the plug. The sound died instantly, but the damage was done. From that night on, the house changed. Walls began vibrating at random intervals, subtle but palpable. Furniture shifted by inches overnight. The family dog, Sadie, refused to go near the basement stairs. When forced, she would bark wildly at the corner where the hollow tile had been. Then came the shadows. Lily told her mother that she'd seen men in the walls. Not real men, she explained, but thin, shaking outlines made of black glass. They would appear in the corners of her room at night and vanish when she turned on the light. Harold Brinks returned, visibly shaken by the recordings Paul had made. He admitted something he hadn't told them before. Back in 1972, the military had sealed off a bunker site just outside Dayton, Ohio, after a communications test went horribly wrong. Several technicians vanished. No bodies, just their gear. And a final broadcast, full of screams. That site had since been erased from public records. Whatever they buried, Harold said grimly, they didn't do a good job. A week later, Harold went missing. He left his house in the morning with his files on the Whitmore property, telling a neighbor he was going to blow the lid off this thing. He never returned. His car was found idling by the side of a rural road, the passenger door wide open. Inside was only a cassette tape marked FREC 19.3, and on it, a looped recording of the same static pattern heard in the Whitmore basement, followed by a whisper, "You found us." Terrified, the Whitmores tried to sell the house, but word had gotten out. No one wanted it, and the disturbances only escalated. Lily began drawing increasingly disturbing images. A man with no eyes standing in front of a metal door labeled "locked forever." Another showed a spiral staircase that wound down into the earth, ending in total darkness. At school, she stopped speaking altogether. At 3:13 a.m., the static now surged through the entire house, shaking picture frames and making the floor tremble. On 3 separate nights, the basement door slowly creaked open on its own, despite being locked from the outside. Paul finally made his decision. "I'm going down there," he said one night, eyes bloodshot. "They want help. Someone needs to open the door." Sandra tried to stop him, but she knew he wouldn't listen. That evening, he vanished into the basement. She waited upstairs, clutching a kitchen knife, shaking. After an hour, the static stopped. Silence. Then a voice came through the baby monitor, Lily's voice. "Daddy's inside the wall." Sandra bolted downstairs. The basement was freezing, but empty. The hollow tile Paul had fixated on was gone, pulled up to reveal a narrow shaft, just large enough to crawl through. Metal rungs descended into blackness. Paul was nowhere in sight. She screamed into the shaft, over and over, but only heard static in reply, that it stopped. And one final word echoed from below, "Close." The tile slammed back into place. The authorities returned. This time, they didn't pretend. Trucks arrived overnight. Men in hazmat suits swarmed the house, extracting every electronic item, every radio, every notebook Paul had used. They resealed the basement, poured concrete over it, and warned Sandra not to speak about what had happened. She tried to fight, but no lawyer would take the case. The house remained her legal property, but the basement was now a classified structural hazard. Accessing it was a felony. Lily, deeply traumatized, was sent to a psychiatric clinic. She never drew again, never spoke of her father again. When asked about what she saw in the basement, she would simply cover her ears and hum. And yet, in 2003, a new family moved into the home, unaware of its history. Within a week, they called an electrician to report that the basement light kept flickering every night at exactly 3:13 a.m. A neighbor, curious about the return of activity, placed a radio near the property's foundation. It hissed static, and then faintly, "Still here." Asterisk. The new residents of the Whitmore house were the Hanleys, Thomas, and Marcy, along with their teenage son, Kyle. They had recently relocated from Michigan, looking for a fresh start after Thomas's job transfer. The home was sold to them at a suspiciously low price, with vague notes in the paperwork about foundation repairs and electrical anomalies. At first, they felt lucky charmed even. The neighbors were quiet, the street was clean, and the interior had been renovated, with fresh paint and new fixtures. But just a week after moving in, Kyle started hearing it, the buzzing. He kept a small portable radio in his room to listen to music at night, but every time he walked past the basement door, the radio would crackle and distort. The signal didn't, just faded, twisted. It became something else. One evening, the static shifted to a broken voice, a male voice, whispering through a sea of noise. "Turn the dial." 193. Kyle, spooked, unplugged the radio and shoved it into his drawer, but the static didn't stop. It came from the vents, from the bathroom drain, from the hallway at night when the house was dead silent. He told his parents, but they laughed it off. "Old houses make noises," his father said. A few days later, Kyle found something strange in the garage rafters, an old metal box wrapped in canvas. Inside was a dusty notebook, a cracked cassette tape, and several Polaroids of a man crouched in a dimly lit basement, the same basement they now owned. On the back of one photo, in faded ink, was written, "Paul Whitmore, last recording, February 12th, 2000, they answered me." He brought it to his mother. Marcia tried to contact the realtor but got no reply. County records had been partially sealed, but she noticed something on their basement breaker box. One switch had been labeled and then scratched out. When she held it to the light, she could barely make out what it used to say, lower access, that night. Kyle decided to play the cassette on an old tape player he found at a thrift store. The audio began as garbled static, but then cleared, revealing heavy breathing, footsteps on metal stairs, and Paul Whitmore's voice. February 12th. I've breached the lower sub. I don't know what's down here, but the air smells like rust and oil. The walls are sweating. I keep hearing, oh God. Then there was a long pause, followed by screams, not just one voice, dozens, overlapping. Panicked, and then the same word, repeated in broken Morse. Seal, seal, seal. The tape ended abruptly. The Hanleys called the police. The officer who came to inspect dismissed it as a hoax. But Kyle noticed something unsettling as the man left. He made a quick call from his car, saying only, "It's active again." Within hours, unmarked vans returned to the neighborhood. Workers installed new fencing around the property's back perimeter. The basement was declared structurally compromised, and heavy concrete reinforcements were poured again, but the house fought back that night. The Hamleys were awoken at 3:13 a.m. by a violent pounding from the basement floor. Paintings fell off walls. The circuit breakers surged and blew the upstairs lights. Kyle was found in the hallway, nose bleeding, whispering, "They're not dead. They never died. The door just closed." Terrified, the Hanleys moved out within days. The property sat vacant again. Word spread among paranormal investigators and local legends. Rumors of the Morse house began circulating online. Amateur ghost hunters posted recordings of unexplained voices, distorted numbers, and one clip in particular that shook even skeptics. A man walking through the backyard at night caught a voice whispering right into his mic, "Don't open the floor." The clip went viral on a small paranormal forum and reached the attention of Dr. Adrienne Vale, a retired cryptologist and Cold War expert. She had worked for the NSA in the 1980s, specifically analyzing anomalous radio signals, some of which, she revealed, were traced to ghost frequencies never officially explained. She traveled to Mason, Ohio, and stood across the street from the house for 3 hours, listening with a handheld spectrum analyzer. The results? Something was transmitting, not continuously, but in bursts. At 3:13 a.m. on frequency 19.3, she never stepped inside the house. She didn't need to. Her statement, published later in a journal of electromagnetic anomalies, was blunt. This site should have been entombed. A month later, a demolition order was filed by the county. But before anything could be done, a small fire broke out in the basement of the house. Firefighters responding to the scene reported thick black smoke, not from flames, but from burned electronics and wires that had been yanked out of walls as if pulled from within. They found no sign of ignition, no accelerants. The source of the heat? The basement floor. Worse still, when they reviewed helmet cam footage, one firefighter's feet glitched heavily as he descended the stairs. The final seconds of his footage, before the camera cut out, showed what looked like an open hatch in the floor and a hand reaching up. That firefighter, Elijah Romero, has refused all interviews since, but his partner, in a brief and now deleted blog post, described hearing a voice in his earpiece as they evacuated. One of them got out. The fire marked a turning point. Afterward, the property was fenced off permanently. The county labeled it a geophysical hazard zone, and new maps of the neighborhood simply showed the lot as unavailable. But the house remained. No one came to tear it down. No crew ever arrived. And yet, people noticed lights on inside. At night, neighbors reported hearing strange sounds, metallic groans, the distant echo of boots on stairs, and worst of all, voices, not talking, pleading, begging, "Please let us out." A local teenager, daring his friends, slipped onto the property one evening and placed his phone against the basement window. He caught 5 minutes of audio static interspersed, with clicks and a voice whispering over and over, "Turn the dial. Frequency is the key." He never posted the video. Within a day, men in suits showed up at his house. His phone was confiscated. He deleted his online accounts and refused to talk to anyone after that dot. Then came the rain dot in 2007. After an unusually strong summer thunderstorm, the neighborhood's storm drains backed up. When county workers arrived to clear them, they discovered something shocking. Several manholes in the area had been welded shut from below. Confused, they dug deeper. Just 3 blocks from the old Whitmore house, they found an underground shaft dry, steel reinforced and covered in decades of dust. It led to a long corridor lined with rusted-out communication consoles. The structure hadn't appeared on any city blueprints. It was the top level of the bunker. The lower levels, they claimed, were inaccessible. They were lying. A junior engineer on the inspection team, David Miller, later confessed to a friend that they had found a staircase leading down to 3 more levels, all sealed by mechanical doors with no power. But as they walked the upper floor, Miller swore he heard someone tapping in Morse code from beneath their boots. He translated it on site. Alive. Below, code is blood. The next day, Miller disappeared. No car. No sign of struggle. Just a blank page left on his apartment printer with one phrase: "Do not listen. Do not transmit." By 2011, local legends around the house and the Cold War bunker had taken a darker tone. Theories online ranged from buried government experiments to time displacement and even parallel dimension breaches. But one recurring theme remained consistent. In all stories, something was still active inside Dot in the fall of that year. 2 college students from Cincinnati tried to document the story for their senior film project. Armed with cameras, parabolic mics, and EMF detectors, they camped across the street for 5 nights. On the 3rd night, their cameras caught movement in the basement window, flickering light. Then a face, but not a person's face, pale, gaunt. Eyes completely black, like scorched glass. It didn't blink. It simply stared, and then slowly raised one hand and tapped the window once. Thought the students fled. They uploaded only 1 frame of the footage before going completely silent online. Within a week, both had withdrawn from school. One checked into a psychiatric facility in Columbus. The other moved out of state and now lives under a new name. In an interview years later, the surviving student whispered just 1 sentence before cutting the interview short. It looked like a man, but it wasn't wearing a face. The basement wasn't just haunted. It was inhabited. In 2016, a brief power outage during a winter storm left much of the town in darkness. Several homes surrounding the property reported something strange during the blackout. Their radios turned on by themselves, all on frequency 19.3, and playing beneath the hissing static was a repeated message: "Open the hatch. We are ready. Open the hatch. We are ready." Then total silence. 2 months later, the town experienced a small, unexplained earthquake centered precisely beneath the Whitmore lot. Seismologists said it wasn't a tectonic event, it was too sudden. More like a blast or collapse. Locals claimed they heard a low-frequency hum just before it hit, rising in pitch like a jet engine. The tremor lasted only 6 seconds. Afterward, 2 strange changes were noticed. First, a faint column of steam, or maybe vapor, was seen rising from a crack in the property's foundation. Second, the street's underground utility lines recorded a brief, unauthorized power drain equivalent to several megawatts of electricity, as if something down there had powered on. And then nothing. The lot sat quiet, silent, for years. Until 2022. A new developer, unaware of the house's past, purchased the property at auction. They intended to tear down the house and build luxury townhomes. Within 2 days of demolition beginning, the crew walked off the job. One man, a foreman named Gene Walcott, told a reporter, "It ain't just the floor. That place is listening to us." He described strange sensations, being watched, feeling vibrations through his boots, and most disturbingly, hearing voices through walkie-talkies that weren't even powered on. Work was halted again. State official from the Department of Emergency Management quietly visited the site under cover of a soil erosion review. She spent 6 hours walking the perimeter with a high-frequency scanner. When asked for comment, she said only, "We missed one. There's still a signal." To this day, the lot remains sealed. Cameras guard it. No one is allowed near it after dark, but at exactly 3:13 a.m. every night, locals say you can still hear it if you're quiet enough. The hum, the static, the faint pulsing light flickering behind the basement window that shouldn't exist anymore. And on some nights, if you place an old AM radio near the fence and turn the dial just right, you might hear it. Turn the dial. Let us out. Asterisk after years of official silence, the site became folklore. Locals nicknamed it the Listening House. Children dared each other to touch the fence. Teenagers claimed to see flickering lights under the ground on moonless nights. Hobbyists scanned the airwaves at 3:13 a.m. and swore they heard signals. No human could have sent bursts of incomprehensible numbers, screams coded in static, and once, a full name spoken clearly, Paul Whitmore. In 2023, a true crime podcaster named Andrea Steele decided to dig deeper. She wasn't interested in ghost stories. She wanted facts. She tracked down former residents, combed property records, and even acquired a redacted Cold War document that referenced something called Echo Depth Station 9. According to her findings, Echo Depth Station 9 was a deep underground command relay site buried across multiple U.S. test locations in the 1960s. Their goal? Survive a nuclear blast and remain in communication. Via low-frequency encoded bursts, that Station 9 had been shut down after a containment failure in 1971. Personnel were never recovered. Worse, the report stated that shortly before all contact was lost, one final message was transmitted using the station's own automated system. Do not retrieve. Containment breached. They are still speaking. Andrea shared her findings online in a limited podcast series titled Beneath Suburbia. Episode 3 featured a chilling interview with an anonymous man claiming to be a retired intelligence tech. His voice was altered and his face hidden, but what he said was unforgettable. Station 9 wasn't just for command relay. They were testing deep-wave psychometric induction sending messages not just through machines, but through people. Frequencies that could implant thought, control. After they sealed the site, some believed the signal continued without a transmitter, like it became alive. He paused, then added, "Once a signal is heard by a living mind, it doesn't need a machine anymore." The episode went viral. Within days, Andrea's website was taken offline. Her YouTube uploads vanished. Her podcast was delisted. She vanished from social media and from the real world. Last seen in a Cincinnati diner on October 17th, 2023, she reportedly told a friend over coffee, "I think they're transmitting again." She never made it home. Only one thing was found in her apartment, a voice recorder still running, playing back 23 minutes of static, and then softly, "Andrea, come below." The incident made national news for a moment, then faded. Just another strange disappearance. But for those paying attention, it was proof. The bunker was not silent. That winter, a team of amateur spelunkers mapped a series of interconnected drainage and utility tunnels stretching beneath Mason, Ohio, deep within a sealed service shaft. Never charted before, they found a rusted bulkhead door. On it, spray painted decades ago in fading yellow. 89. Deep Listening Lab. The team uploaded a few blurry photos, but the images were taken down within hours. One member of the team, Jonah Ellis, later claimed that when they touched the door, it vibrated. A low-frequency buzz, like a distant generator, but no hum of machines. It felt organic. Jonah reported nightmares afterward. In them, he descended the stairs beneath the bulkhead door, finding rows of ancient radio consoles manned by withered, motionless figures in military uniforms still seated, eyes wide open, mouths slack, as if they had been listening. For decades, at the far end of the room stood a single steel door marked Level 3, audio induction. He said he never opened it. But in every dream, he heard the same phrase whisper from the other side. We never stopped listening. He stopped speaking about it publicly. His friends say he disconnected his internet and removed every electronic device from his house, but at night, his wife swears he sleepwalks to the basement, touches the breaker box, and softly mutters, frequency 19.3. More strange activity. Followed in early 2024, a series of electrical outages struck the homes surrounding the lot, each time centered around 3:13 a.m. Power surge logs revealed odd bursts of voltage, matching M-code signaling, a Cold War-era protocol no longer used. An officially decommissioned .1 engineer reviewing the surge logs described it like this: it's as if something was dialing out, like it was trying every frequency until someone picked up. Around this time, strange health effects were reported by nearby residents: nosebleeds, migraines, night terrors. One man claimed to wake up with Morse code bruised into his arm dots and dashes shaped into words. When translated, it said, "Still here." By summer, several homes went up for sale. People were fleeing, but the government didn't step in. Instead, they buried the story under zoning issues and infrastructure updates. The lot remains sealed, double-fenced, now with security patrols. No one has entered the basement in over a decade. No one legally anyway, because rumor has it that one man did go in July 2024. A former DARPA technician named Noah Field uploaded a post to an obscure military engineering forum. It simply read, "I found the relay switch. It still works." The post was deleted within hours, but not before a few users saved it. The last line was chilling. They aren't transmitting out. They're transmitting up. The house was the antenna. We were the receivers. That was the last anyone ever heard from Noah Field. In the spring of 2025, a maintenance worker inspecting underground fiber lines near the old Whitmore property went off schedule for 42 minutes. When a supervisor finally contacted him, the worker answered the radio in a dazed tone. "I heard them. They're underneath. They're trying to move upward." He never returned to work. When questioned, he claimed he didn't remember making the call, but when his helmet cam footage was recovered, it showed something startling. In a drainage culvert below the Whitmore lot, he had found a narrow tunnel made of warped, reinforced steel, seemingly melted shut at both ends. As the camera panned across the metal, a message was seen scratched into the wall, not in English, but in Morse code. "Receivers, do not transmit back." The feed cut out moments later. The timestamp was 3:13 a.m. After that, the federal government officially condemned the entire block around the property. Residents were bought out in silence, and heavy equipment was brought in under the cover of night, but no demolition took place. Instead, workers dug out the foundation of the Whitmore home and poured tons of quick-drying polymer concrete directly into the basement chamber. Security lights were installed, seismic sensors. Even a Faraday cage perimeter was placed underground. Locals were told it was to prevent future sinkholes. But those who've lived in Mason long enough know better, because the static never stopped. Now, even miles from the site, People have reported hearing strange tones on AM radios late at night. The frequency? 19.3. The messages? Evolving. Not just distress calls anymore. Now they ask questions. Who's listening? How many heard us? Are you ready to hear? Some believe the signal has spread, moving beyond the house and into the very devices we carry. Phones, smart speakers, anything with a receiver. One viral story tells of a woman who was listening to a podcast at 3:13 a.m. when the host's voice cut out and was replaced with a deep, slow whisper. The antenna was never the house. It was the human mind. She unplugged the device, but the voice kept speaking. No one else in the room heard it. She was later admitted to a psychiatric facility after claiming she could see the code in people's faces. To this day, the house's original address, once 214 Brook Hollow Lane, has been erased from GPS systems. A satellite image search just shows a black square. No entry, no records. Just digital silence, but the fence still stands. Locals claim that on rare nights, the light in the basement flickers, though there's no power line feeding the structure. And if you're bold or foolish enough to walk near the lot at 3:13 a.m. with the radio, the static returns. Only now it's layered with something else. A heartbeat dot slow, steady, mechanical dot, and underneath it, a message barely decipherable in the noise. We are above now. So if you ever find yourself in suburban Ohio and your radio starts hissing, at an odd hour, don't listen, don't turn the dial. Don't decode the message, because some frequencies weren't meant to be heard, and some voices, once they reach you, never let go.